Hey Zwifters, I'm Simon Schofield and this is the Zwiftcast. This episode is a special with the man who has the greatest influence on how we Zwift. John Mayfield, the game's creator, calls the shots. One of the founders of the company, he remains where he's always been, firmly at the head of game development. John rarely speaks in great detail about what goes on behind the scenes, why decisions are made, what features are accelerated and which are delayed. But he agreed to do just that for Zwiftcast listeners. The next hour or so contains some insight, some revelations and some answers to the questions you asked. I hope you enjoy listening. Welcome to the Zwiftcast, John Mayfield, the creator of Zwift. Hi, John.
How's it going, Simon?
It's going very well, thank you. You'll probably correct me on this because it's the sort of thing you know off the top of your head, but exactly 7 years, 3 months and 12 days ago, to be absolutely precise, you made the now legendary post on Slow Twitch. Did you ever conceive that length of time later you'd be sitting looking out at 200 plus employees and over 1 million accounts created?
Absolutely not. No, I'm not the type of guy that actually imagines world domination or market domination or anything of the sort. I did sort of imagine it would be cool if, we had a little studio of 8 or 9 people making something that, maybe 20,000 users were using. So I think that was where I'd imagined it. Eric is definitely the dreamer and the businessman, and he sees the larger opportunity, and was certainly convinced there was more people that could be interested in something like Zwift than I was. So,
I mean, the responsibilities that come with your position now. You're not only the founder of a company that has very serious levels of funding, big headcount, huge ambitions. Do all those sit easily with you, or are you still kind of happiest coding? Is the boardroom boring, John?
It's interesting. I think being in the trenches is very exciting. Being the programmer on a task, I think I really enjoy, as well as being in the boardroom. You're sort of, the boardroom sounds scary, right? But it's actually like the most passionate Zwifters in there. So, and they're also probably the most invested, literally. That's all, like something good always comes out of the boardroom. I really enjoy those meetings as well. I think it's the stuff in the middle that's harder to be passionate about. The sort of day to day, you have to deal with the growing pains, the more people to organize, it's more teams. The overhead of just, back in, let's say 2014, right? If we had wanted to do something as simple as like the rainbow ride-ons that we had recently, I would just kind of, there might be a marketing person that says, hey, this is a cool campaign we can get behind and we'll do something for charity. And then we're thinking about doing something in the game. I'd say, oh, let's do rainbow ride-ons. That sounds cool. 30 minutes later, the thing would be done. The charity would be picked and we'd sort of be off on our way. Today, it's much more involved, right? There's departments and we've got briefs presented, and then there's meetings around it, and then there's project managers scheduling the items, and there's meetings to coordinate how the scheduling's going and are all the checkpoints being met. And that is definitely less fun than before, right? There's a lot of stakeholders who are trying to do something bigger than what we were 5 years ago. So I think it's to be expected, it's normal, but that's probably the stuff in the middle, right? It's not the coding or the boardroom that's tough.
Well, let's talk about the way Zwift and its impact on the world and cycling in particular has changed. I mean, Zwift has had I think it's had a long honeymoon period because it was so very different. And to some people, of course, and particularly new subscribers, it still is. But do you get the sense that honeymoon period, for some users at least, is now drawing to a close, and there's a kind of hunger for the next big thing in Zwift, I mean? And can there ever be one that matches Zwift's initial impact?
I think people I think that honeymoon phase ends for different people at different times. I mean, I think some people, they try Zwift and they start in the late fall and they're done by February, and that's sort of good enough for them. They might come back every year. Other people seem to be happy for years, and they've found something they love in Zwift, right? I think somebody like a triathlete might be fine just having something slightly more interesting for their training, right? Their workout mode and synchronizing with their coach. That's something that could last, for many, many years. And then there's the groups that have some of the amazing like group rides and races on Zwift. Like that could go on for a long time, just like Tuesday night crit races all over the world have been going on for forever. I think where the experience, probably has less legs to it is when you haven't found sort of that key thing in Zwift that you like to do, right? If you're just getting in and riding around, you've sort of like seen it, you've got some jerseys, whatever. I think that's where we have a lot of room for improvement. And there's definitely a shorter honeymoon phase there. The oldest experience is sort of like just riding around. Like you can get some achievements, there's some missions or challenges, but when's the last time we've even revisited those, right? It's really been years. So I think going back and putting in a bunch of enhancements to that, building that reward system and having things to do for a lot of those users, I think would really help. I think that's where.
And it sounds to me as though you have answered that question, which is that it is going to be difficult to match the initial impact, and now it is more about, as you described, filling in the gaps and enriching the experience rather than having that big bang or something that matches that big bang when Zwift first arrived.
I mean, I think we still have some pretty interesting stuff planned. The big impact was really just, it's networked riding together. You can see everybody else there. Like that's sort of there and done. In the future, I mean, I think it'd be hard to top sort of that initial thing. It's like the invention of the automobile was a big deal, and then everybody else is sort of iterating on it for 100-something years. But it's certainly, just like cars have gotten better, I expect Zwift to get significantly better over the years and hopefully be the best thing that's out there.
That's a good analogy. What technical innovations that are kind of visible now or close to being visible do you think could impact Zwift the most? I mean, I suppose the two obvious big ones to think about are cloud gaming and artificial intelligence, or there may be others that you're thinking about. Do you think those two things or anything else will have a big impact on the game? Or technical innovation in general?
I don't think technical innovation has that much of a say in Zwift's story. I mean, the biggest technical breakthrough was probably like wireless transmission of exercise devices. I mean, the internet obviously came, 20-something years ago to the masses. But all we really needed beyond that was just low power wireless communication. That's like technical thing we really needed, and maybe consumer hardware having some minimal amount of 3D power, whereas a while back you sort of needed a nice computer. Now it's like even an iPad can play Zwift pretty well. I don't think there's any technological innovation that's coming that's going to be super necessary for Zwift's success. There's a lot of things we need, but none of them are like bottlenecked on machine learning or anything like that.
I just want to stick with this artificial intelligence thing a bit though, because I mean some people say, maybe with some justification, that there's real headroom available for making Zwift a super sophisticated, highly personalized training tool. A kind of Zwift to one experience based on, the masses of data that you've got and training and coaching expertise you've got in-house or you could get hold of to really, and use artificial intelligence and machine learning to really, really personalize training. Do you see that on the roadmap?
I'm interested in it as much as I've signed up for a bunch of custom training things in the past where they sort of look at your data and come up with something, and I felt like all of it was sort of
that crude.
I felt like the intentions might have been good, but in the end it was sort of more of a thing to market it's like to advertise it, like, oh, it's a custom workout system. It's better than everybody else. And you get in there, and it's like basically the same stuff that you get anywhere, but it's got the buzzwords behind it. So I guess I haven't been that impressed. I'm sure there's more we could do, but we only get a glimpse of what a Zwifter does, right? I mean, I would guess that most people have outside activities too that we can't easily track. And I would also guess that somebody like Strava probably wouldn't be that happy if we started harvesting all the data back into Zwift for outside activities. So, we're in a tough spot. It'd be interesting. I think there's some things we could do. I don't think it's that essential. I guess I don't know how much is necessary. I'm not that much of a believer in that it needs to be super custom. I feel like at the very top end of the athletes, there's total value to that. But to most people, basing your training off of some power levels, whether it's your 5-minute or 20-minute or your 60-minute critical power, I think that's like, it feels sufficient to me. The biggest challenge is getting people to do their exercise, right? Motivating them to do the exercise. I think that's half the battle.
Will there always be just one Zwift, John? I mean, I ask this question because, is there an argument for instance, a Zwift Train, Zwift Sport for racing, Zwift Ride for just, cycling, and then we've got Zwift Run and Zwift Row? I mean, can one platform continue to serve these different branches of the sport and serve different sports, which I think is in the plan? Will that always happen in one place, or do you see Zwift splitting into a number of more specialised services?
I hope we can keep it in one app. Technically, for sure, we can do that. The confusion really comes down to the messaging around it, right? I think Zwift Run has suffered a little bit from people expecting it to be as gamified as Zwift Cycling, and it's not. It's more about training. It's more about getting ready for a half marathon. The group runs can also be pretty good if you find one of the really good runs we have. The Run in the Park is probably my favorite back when I was doing it every Saturday morning. But it's not gamified like cycling is. I mean, even just cycling as a sport is much more gamified than running as a sport. People have that expectation and they try Zwift running and this is not as exciting as I thought it was going to be. But if you came out from the other side and advertised Zwift Run as its own thing, maybe it wasn't even called Zwift Run, it could be called something else, and it was a training and group run and racing platform for runners, we might have had an easier time. So I think that would be the only argument really for trying to break it out, is to simplify the messaging. But technically speaking, there's no reason why they're not all in one world and one app. We've certainly had the discussions in the years past. We haven't had that discussion anytime recently. I think currently the plan is we keep it all together.
Will cycling continue to get deeper as Zwift gets wider? So as Zwift becomes Zwift Run, Zwift Row, whatever else it may become, will cycling, I guess the core of the question is, will cycling continue to be the core product? And will you continue to develop cycling as you branch off into other things?
I don't think we'll ever have less people on cycling than we do now. I'd imagine we'll keep scaling up the cycling features group. The running features group is pretty small right now, and it might scale up if running kind of takes off at some point. And the same will be said for rowing. So I would expect, right now, the majority of our effort is on the cycling product, because that's where the majority of our users are.
So cycling's going to continue to get lots of love.
Yeah, and a lot of the features that we do, we do them for cycling, but they're for all sports we could ever support, right? I mean, they're generic features. We have workouts and we have events for running, just like we do with cycling.
Well, given that, what are your 3 top priorities for cycling? They can be
broad areas?
Focusing on the quality of the software is a big thing for us this year. Right? We were in like frantic, just keep building stuff and adding it on and like put the bugs in a backlog, and we would fix a certain amount each release, but it was more about trying to get as many things out there to see what was going to be popular and what wasn't, and grow the user base. Now we're sort of like at that point where we're big enough to start focusing on the quality of the experience, start fixing some of those things that might only affect 200, 300 people, but still we could fix that if we had 2 days to spend on it. We're trying to spend a little bit more time on quality. And like, for example, time trial mode we thought was going to be done in let's say 6 or 8 weeks, and we ended up spending another month just to polish some of the user interface and make the staging experience a little bit nicer. We have these conveyor belts that sort of move people up. It didn't look that good at the beginning. 3 years ago, we would have just launched it as it was and said, hey, help us try out time trial mode as a beta thing. Here we tried to make it a little bit more polished than before. So quality is one of the things. Making it more fun is a big focus as well.
So invisibility power-up, good example of that?
I don't know if that's a good example of that. We have some fun stuff coming. That's sort of one of the power-ups we've had in the back of our minds for a while, and it was easy to do. We just don't draw the guy or the Zwifter when the person's invisible. But I can touch on fun in a bit. The third thing is about ease of use. Right? Each year we sort of have a new batch of people as the weather turns or the hours, the daylight gets shorter. And our UI hasn't really evolved much since the early days. Like back when I said it was like 8 people, right? I was the UI guy, and probably shows, right? We had to do something simple. We picked a style. We didn't go all technical with it. It was a bit, I think some people called it like Fisher-Price looking, kind of a kid's interface. Anyway, it needs some refreshing. I talked about earlier maybe having suggestions for stuff people can do for the people that are just getting in and do want to just ride. I think that's part of ease of use. You kind of log in, it tells you what to do or gives you some choices. It's something that we want to focus on as well this year. So those are probably the 3 elements, and they're not specific to cycling, they're sort of across the whole experience. And I think across all these points, there's this, I'm sure I've mentioned it before, I don't know if I've mentioned it on the Zwiftcast, but a couple years ago I started playing a game called Forza Horizons that they seem like they've been building exactly what Zwift could be, except they're doing it for Xbox, and it's a driving racing game that you play with a joystick. But I mean, they even have like roads. They released an expansion that has like roads up in the sky, just like the New York expansion. They have a blimp that flies around the world. Watopia is very similar to the world in Forza Horizons 3. They've got networked multiplayer where you're all kind of in a world, and you can go race with people, or you can go like explore the world and do little challenges or missions. When you log in, it's got stuff to do, and they've been building this game with a kind of a top tier video game team for so long, because they're on Forza Horizons 4 now, and I think 5 will come out in another year or so. That they've iterated on so much. It's a very polished experience. It's got the fun factor. They figured out what people like to do over all those years, and it's got the sort of, I guess maybe ease of use is debatable. It's there's just buttons everywhere and whatnot, but gamers seem to have no problems playing it. So I think they, to some extent, epitomize what I think Zwift could be, is this like AAA, really fun, really complete piece of software where you can still do what you want to do. I play Forza Horizons different than other people.
Let's go back to fun, because you looked as though you might be on the verge of giving us a bit of a taste of how things might be made more fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, partly it's about having stuff to do. So we touched on that. If you're just logging into Zwift and you're not the racer or the group ride or the workout type of Zwifter, I think there's tons of stuff we can do about, for the people just riding around in the world. And again, I'm going to fall back to Forza. One of the things they have now is this thing called like a Forzathon, right? There's this blimp that flies around, and eventually, or every once in a while, it'll kind of show up and say, Forzathon starts in 9 minutes, and there's a countdown clock, and all the people in the world can drive to that spot. And when the countdown hits 0, you're all together and you're doing a challenge together in the world, right? So you might have to go do a drifting thing around a corner and try to rack up enough points all together, and you see a cumulative counter. We had planned something almost exactly like that in the volcano expansion. There's a machine inside the volcano. There's like these gearing mechanisms that was supposed to shoot a laser beam out the top of the volcano, and it was going to be activated when enough people came to that part of the world, started riding the volcano circuit, and the cumulative wattage was going to build up enough to like power the machine and like activate a thing in the world, and it was going to do something. I don't know what it was going to do. Of course, it got cut for time, like all sorts of kind of lofty dreams that we have. But the art is actually in there. There's like a piece of a machine inside the volcano that we sort of never wrote the rest of the code to like activate. But I mean, little stuff like that, like rallying the community together to try to activate something. Maybe it unlocks another expansion, or maybe everybody gets extra experience points or something. I don't know. There's all sorts of things it could be. But going back and revisiting all the experiences and adding all these cool ideas. Not like we have 5 years worth of ideas.
And some of them are partly in game, it sounds like. Or some of the work on some of them has been done.
I mean, often we'll talk to the artists about the ideas, and they'll sort of like maybe sketch out the stuff in the art to give us the idea of what it might look like, but then generally we are bottlenecked on programming time, so like it would kind of get stalled there. But similarly with like the events, right? One of the big things this year for events was we were going to try to add more flexibility to them and some different modes, kind of officially, as well as try to enhance our race results so that they could be a little bit closer to being legitimate, which is important for the races. So time trial mode is one of those things. I wouldn't say that's necessarily that fun of an event mode, but it's us going back and sort of enhancing it. The power-ups are just something we're trying. I mean, they're totally opt-in. If a race organizer wants to try one of them, they can. We've also changed it so that race organizers can set the percentages of every power-up. If they want no power-ups, they can do that. If they want all arrow power-ups, they can do that too. If they want 50-50, whatever. They could set, wind coefficients and all sorts of different parameters. We're trying to get it set up so that we can really let the community have some control over some of those experiences. And we might find, just by the sheer number of events, we might find some interesting combinations that are fun to play.
Wind coefficients. Does that suggest that wind is?
Like wind resistance, yeah. You could say the air density is half or something, or.
But we're not talking about winds blowing across Zwift anytime soon, or are we?
Well, I think it makes sense once you can steer your avatar a little bit and pick your place on the road. I think then winds would make more sense. Without that, it feels like it's just a decoration. We're just making it look different on the screen.
So we've talked about steering for ages. I mean, I've talked to you about steering. It must have been 2 or 3 years ago, and I think you've had a kind of hobby prototype for steering for ages. So
2011, there was steering in the software, yes.
So where are we with this?
Well, Zwift Companion app has had steering in it probably for 3 years now. So it uses the gyroscopes, the tilt sensors to sort of figure out if it was mounted to your handlebars, kind of how are you moving them? And it uses very subtle motions. We're not turning the bars 30 degrees or anything. It's pretty subtle. But we had some problems with drifting of the sensors. So by the end of a 20-minute race, going straight actually meant your bars were turned 10 degrees to the right. It's kind of
Which is awkward.
So I think recently we've made some headway there in canceling some of that out. So I don't know how much I want to say, but we have some interesting steering experiences. We've actually, in the past, we've actually written two different experiences. One is over in well, if I say it, somebody's going to go try to find it.
Yeah.
There's a hidden area back in that rainforest, the rainforest jungle, where there was kind of an arena that you were going to be able to ride through different paths, and you had a timer, and each ring you went through would add a few seconds to the timer, and you had to see how far you could get, and steering played a key part of that. And it was constructed such that it wasn't part of the main experience. We don't want to alienate the people that don't care about steering. But we wanted people to be able to opt into it and then give us feedback on how well the steering worked. But it was a bit, I didn't like the full experience, so we sort of shelved that.
But again, this lives in games. So this
There is a dirt path going to an area. I expect screenshots. Somebody's going to post screenshots. Most of the cool stuff isn't in there. It got cut.
But this suggests if you warmed to this idea, or if you solved some problems, this could still be activated.
If at some point we wanted to ship it, we would spend some more time on it and ship it. But the core part of it isn't even in the code. Some of the art remnants of it are there, basically.
But so does that reveal your thinking about steering? Is that it will be confined to certain parts of Watopia, or certain parts of certain code?
No, not at all. No, I think the long-term goal is steering should be a thing, I think, across all the experiences, right? But we've got the problem of not a lot of people are going to have a phone mount, or maybe it doesn't work that well over the phone, and you've got to work on a piece of hardware, maybe a $79 riser block or something that has a little bit of sensing in it. So in the meantime, we'd probably start by having it confined so that we could get test feedback and see, are people hitting the side walls just like a pinball in a pinball machine, or are they actually able to get through the path, and how accurate was it? What's their feedback? We might send them a survey. How was the steering thing? So it's more about learning at this point. The steering stuff has been in the game, like I said, since 2011. And one of the modes is sort of the road mode, where you're just sort of influencing if you're left or right on the road, but you can't go off the road, right? So it's more of the road cyclists mode. And then the other mode is you can literally just ride anywhere, and those would be confined to certain areas. So we could have experiences, we could have event types that just need steering. I think it could be pretty interesting.
So it's coming, and we're going to get onto Zoom soon. But it sounds to me as though there's still a significant amount of work to do on this before we start seeing steering in time terms. Or does it just get knocked down because it's not a priority and there's a new course to build? And
somebody is working on it right now, which we couldn't always say, but somebody's definitely working on it right now.
All right, well, I daren't dig deeper on when, because we're going to get into this section of the interview where I talk to you about Zune.
My favorite section.
Now, Zune has become a kind of good-humoured, I do think it's used generally good-humouredly, but it's become a bit of a Zwift meme. When are we going to get X? And it's always Zune, which has become Zoom. And it is good-humoured, I think, but it does reflect, I think, John, a bit of an underlying frustration with the delivery of new features from some elements of the community. And we do know that online communities are easily frustrated, and ones that are comprised largely of cyclists, I think, are particularly easily frustrated because there's a lot of passion driving that. And it's quite a volatile mix, that. But I mean, can you look Zwiftcast listeners in the eye and say you're happy with the speed of development of shiny new things for Zwift?
Be hard to look them in the eye over a podcast.
Imagine you're looking at Zwiftcast listener.
But I don't know that The short answer is no, of course not. But then I also think about almost any product I'm passionate about, and for all of them, I'm like, why doesn't my internet router have this feature yet? Like this other one had it for 5 years and this one doesn't. Why doesn't this car do this thing? All the other cars do this. Why doesn't this one? So I get it, and it's definitely frustrating to have all these ideas that we want to do, and then just the day-to-day of like getting things done, and also trying to get them done to a higher quality in a bigger organization it's a big challenge.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's dig a bit deeper into this, and let me be, the voice of every man Zwifter who says, yeah, but hang on, John, you've just raised, you've got $120 million to spend, you're not short of money, you're on the west coast of the USA, you're next door to a city that, throws out top-tier games every day of the week. Why can't things happen faster? I mean, what are the roadblocks? Is recruitment of developers still a problem for you?
Yeah, we've only hired, I think, 2 programmers since we raised the money. We did hire a internal recruiting team, right? So step 1 has sort of happened. And we've also been able to hire sort of our UI and user experience team. So the product team now has a team of like 4 or 5 people working on user interface across web and Swift Companion and the game. And we've got some, I think we've got some really good stuff coming there. But we're sort of scaling up our capabilities on the product team. We've recently hired a project manager. I'm sort of trying to get rid of a bunch of the stuff that I've been doing, right? You start at the beginning, I was sort of like the UI designer, the lead programmer, the lead game designer. It was too much stuff. It was fine back in the early days. Now trying to, sort of have key people on the team and scale up, right? Sort of like that startup to, like you said, 200 people. There's growing pains. I think we're in the place where we can start hiring. I think the pieces are in place. So if you're a cyclist and you're into programming, give us a call. We've also got an opening for, I'm just going to plug it. We've got an opening for a game designer. I'm looking for a game designer that's sort of from the games industry, but also a cyclist, which is going to take a while to find, but I think that would be a key. I think that'd be a key person for us.
Okay. So you are building a structure that's going to enable you to ship more product faster, by the sounds of things. When do you see that process coming to fruition? Well, can you put a timeline on when you will be happier with stuff shipping faster?
We're going to be able to ship more stuff. I don't know about ship more stuff faster. We have a lot of things in development right now, whereas I couldn't have said that years ago. It was kind of like we focused on 1 or 2 things. Now we've got 5 or 6 things going at one time, but often those are 2 or 3 month projects instead of 2-week projects. So there's a bunch of big things working, and I don't know that I doubt you'd ever get into a spot where you're happy with the amount of stuff shipping. I don't think that's possible.
Are Zwifters going to be a bit happier, do you think? You know Zwifters.
I'd like to say yes, but I can't. I don't know. Probably not. We will have a lot of stuff coming. I'm excited about all the things we have in development, but it's still frustratingly slow to do things at a higher quality standard, right? We were literally like, when we had 100 customers, sorry, they weren't customers, they were 100 Zwifters. We could literally write some code, try a feature out, and like just ship it the next day, right? Worst case, you annoy 100 people because something crashed or something. We don't have that luxury. Everything has to take a little bit longer, and even then, as the scale of the software grows, there's more things to test. There's more places where something could have reverted back. Maybe we fixed a bug 3 years ago, but now when a programmer changed something, it's broken something else, just because there's so many different paths to take in the software that's grown. So
the more complex the game, the higher number of subscribers, the higher risk new things are, and the more cautious you become.
I'm not cautious with the features we're planning. It's more about caution about the development process and the QA process, the quality assurance that takes place. And that inevitably means sometimes something might be done in development and it's going to be 3 or 4 weeks before sort of, if it's a big feature, it might take weeks of kind of QA and little bug fixes before it goes out, whereas before that would have been 1 day.
And that's just the nature of the beast as things get more complex and bigger.
I think it's inevitable. I think that's sort of what most mature software companies do. We're still trying to release every, say, 3 weeks. I think it's a normal sort of iteration cycle. It's just some of the releases have been less interesting because there's just some bug fixes in there. Right? We a lot of the team checked in the easy stuff that was easy for our QA team to check, but the big projects that are taking months sort of aren't ready to go out, so they're not, kind of looks quiet for a little while.
And that's just the nature of the beast.
I do like it when we have a release where we've actually got something to talk about, and we definitely need more of those.
What are the arguments against, John, publishing a roadmap? I know you think about this, but why would you not do that?
Well, I mean, there are competitors out there, and if one of them, most of them are smaller than us. I don't know what would stop them from sort of doing what we have planned. To some extent, when CV Arcade was announced, let me just preface this by saying I hadn't seen it. I just heard the name, like CV Arcade, oh cool, and they're going to try to gamify racing. I was like, ah, crap, they beat us to it. That was sort of on our 2019 roadmap, was let's make a bunch of fun event modes. And having a smaller software player come up and say, hey, we're going to iterate on this stuff. It's like, they're going to beat us to like our 2019 thing, right? We have a lot of sort of fun event modes coming this year, or at least that's the hope. And I feel like that would happen more often if we were publishing. Here's kind of where we're thinking. So try to sort of like a competitive advantage. I don't know. Like I don't want to just give away what we're doing. We do have ideas.
Yeah, it's a good enough reason, I think, and I think it's a reason that Zwifters will because you see the question posed quite a lot. Why will they not tell us what they're doing? And if you say, well, because we don't want competitors stealing our ideas, I think people would accept that. However, having said that, I mean, do you seriously think people like CV Arcade are genuine competitors? I mean, Zwift is, it wipes the floor with its competitors.
I don't know what answer I could give that would sound good, so I just won't answer that question. But I mean, we certainly are going to look at everybody that's out there. The main reason I brought them up was because I thought they were the smartest about how you might fill a niche that Zwift doesn't do, right? There's a couple of competitors that are trying to just make Zwift, which seems like a weird thing to do. Like Zwift is already Zwift. It already exists. Why would you make the exact same thing? CV Arcade actually tried to make something different. And when I just heard the name and saw the pixelated font, I was like, oh cool, it's gonna be like a 2D, like simple, trainer thing that a smaller team could do, and it's more focused on just having fun, and maybe it's a little bit less serious, right? And I thought that was a good angle and had some chance of success. I'd probably leave it at that for CV Arcade.
It might be best. It might be best. What happened to voice, John, and why?
We started some research with voice in 2017, and I've actually talked with people through Zwift Companion here at Zwift HQ. So we sort of had it in there at one point as a test to see, but there's a significant server component if we want to sort of have it feel like it's part of the Zwift product. And there's software out there that people are using that's sort of getting the job done for the people that really need it, that we decided to spend our server resources on more important stuff like scalability, keeping the servers up in the winter when we have big events that 5,000 people show up for. Like, there was a point not that long ago that Zwift sometimes would not survive those kind of things, right? So I think we made the right choice back then we'd love to get it back sort of on the radar, and we started sort of doing the R&D again. And now we've got 2 solutions we might look at, but we're still in that mindset that there's plenty of people using Discord for those that need it, and it's probably fine for now. I think for the hardcore, or the more serious Swifters, they'll put in the extra effort and use that in the meantime.
So there's a technical thing. Is there also a kind of compliance and conduct thing, in that voice becomes another channel for some not very nice people to say not very nice things to other people who might be nice? I mean, are all those kind of, were those issues front of mind as well when you were thinking about voice?
In 2017, not as much, because we had a smaller community that was a little bit, you don't really have those kind of issues in smaller communities. As it gets bigger, that's when it starts to become more of a thing that happens. So now it's a little bit on our minds, but I think, with some proper flagging mechanisms and report what you see, I think we should be able to take care. I'm not overly worried about that.
Right. So it's still really a technical issue more than anything else.
Like, if video games all over the world can have voice chat with 16-year-old kids on there, like, I think Swift is going to be. We have it easy.
And I don't want to dwell on this, but I do find the voice thing interesting. I mean, there's a very, very tiny minority of Zwifters, but perhaps there could be more Zwifters who are visually impaired, and some kind of audio description or some audio cues would massively enhance their experience. Is that still really a technical issue? Are there just not enough of those people to justify that kind of thing? Or do you ever think about making Zwift more accessible to people with disabilities?
We definitely think about it. My dad actually in Austin, Texas, runs a company. It's a nonprofit organization that the entire purpose of the organization is to provide jobs for blind people, visually impaired. That's their whole purpose in life, and they provide jobs for hundreds of people in Austin that otherwise would not be able to participate kind of in society as a regular person. They have jobs, they have coworkers. It's really inspiring to see. So I've had conversations with people there, and kind of throwing around the idea of what could the experience even be. And I just don't know that it's Zwift. I don't know, it's not that we don't necessarily want to. It is somewhat about priorities. We have to imagine how many people are actually going to use it. But also, I don't think, even with the resources I've got, specifically with visually impaired, I still don't quite know what the experience would be, if that's compelling enough.
I think the point is, John, for that very small number of people, it would be incredibly compelling. If there was audio description, for instances, that said, there's a 5% slope in 200 meters.
The thing is, all of us want to do that. I think it's we want Zwift to be for everybody, right? So I think if people have ideas of what it is they want, we'd love to read about them, right? It's shoot us an email or get a post on the forum or something. Because I think part of it is just it's hard for us to imagine what it really is that they are thinking about.
Let's talk about eSport. Do you genuinely believe it can be successful?
I mean, I'm sure I've said this 10 different times on the Zwiftcast over the years, but I'm a pessimist. So I'm not convinced that it's 100% chance of success, but it seems like a reasonable thing to try.
So you're fully bought into it?
I'm not excited in the idea that I'd be participating in it. I'm not the super cyclist, but it does seem like it could kind of expose Zwift to a wider audience, and I think especially if the game team can provide some compelling modes of play that are more gamified, it could get more people into this sort of exercise game that is Zwift. Right? This fun experience. We can get that in front of more people. there's more people playing this healthy game.
I mean, I think most people would say that the product is going to require some tweaks to make esports as effective as it possibly could be. Do you see any risk of the kind of esport tail wagging the Zwift dog at all, or do you feel any pressure in that direction?
Esports is set up as, probably even on paper, I think it's set up as a separate organization, right? And their goal is to use the Zwift software to make a compelling thing to watch. They're not product designers or game designers. They are trying to, they may layer a tournament ladder on top of it or something, right? Like that might happen outside of software entirely, right? Because they're doing it's a smaller, more controlled audience. There's certainly things the Zwift software can do to make those broadcast events work a little smoother. And we're doing some of that. We actually have one of our programmers sort of dedicated to broadcast tools for people that are streaming races or whatever else we might want to stream in the future. But for the most part, the esports team kind of hears what we're building from the game team, from the Zwift software team, and they're excited about what's coming, and that's generally where the conversation is. Like, oh, that sounds good. We've got some cool stuff to go. And worst case scenario, they've got time trial mode, they've got basic racing. They can put a point system in place on a web page or whatever on top of that without needing us to change things. Long term, I think if we lock in, if the esports team sort of locks into some compelling sort of like scoring system, I think that could certainly get folded back into Zwift. So there's a little bit of, what's interesting is they have the ability to sort of experiment with team-based stuff because they can organize the teams because lots of the races are small. There's like 20 or 30 people. They could also even organize like 5 versus 5 kind of thing. Whereas in the software, we'd have to do a lot of code. They can basically try that right now. So to some extent, they're helping prototype some stuff we might see in Zwift next year. And we're working on stuff they might be able to use completely in the software now.
So we're not going to see a wholesale or even a significant transformation of Zwift, the product, to accommodate the needs of esport. It's more like esport will work with Zwift to produce a compelling proposition in that area.
The enhancements we have planned for events almost inherently work for esports. So I think it's working out fine. One area that we really have to focus on is just sort of, like I said earlier, maybe working with event results and getting those a little bit more dialed in so they can be more legitimate for races.
Strange enough, that's the very next question on my list of questions, which I've posed rather more rudely, which is, why is there not yet an accurate in-house results service, and will there be soon?
I hate the soon part. Zune, it'll be Zune. We're working on it. We sort of work with Zwift Power to see what Glenn over there thinks of sort of the most important aspects of Zwift Power, and then we've been sort of trying to build some of that into our own system. I think the long-term goal is we don't have to have an external site to be the official results for the key races. I think for the smaller races, the Zwift results are probably fine, but we need to be classifying people into category A, category B, knowing when they bump up to the next category before we can really offer that level of event results. And then only then could we really add in-game sort of like, points races with series of races, and you got to earn points in each one, and there's a final tally. Right now, the B race would just be won by a bunch of A sandbaggers, essentially. Or it might not, but it certainly would be possible.
Which suggests that you might take a slightly more proactive approach to that very frequent complaint that you get from racers, casual racers. I don't really mean esports racers. I mean people who just like to race on Zwift, is that the kind of what a lot of people would really like to see is enforced categorizations of racing. So you would be classified as a B rider by Zwift, and you're only allowed to enter a B-class event. I mean, do you see Zwift being that proactive once you've got the tools to be able to do that?
I don't know that we would keep faster riders from going into the slower groups. I think we would just, like, they might want to be in there for an easy day, but they would be restricted from winning. They'd be, you know, they wouldn't be able to maybe mess up the race by going off the front. I don't know how that could work, but we should totally be putting people in the right category races, and like I said, as long as they're not able to sort of mess up the experience for everybody else, I think it would be fine to choose the other categories if we want.
Let's just, and thanks very much for your time, and I am getting towards the end, I promise, but let's just talk a little bit about the way you in particular, perhaps the game team, perhaps even the whole of Zwift, but let's talk about you, interact with the Zwift community. I mean, the latest update, the time trial mode event update, had brilliant release notes, and you took part in the forum, and there was what I felt was a great dialogue between you and Zwifters. But that was perhaps notable for its infrequency. Should there be more of that? Should there be more regular dialogue?
Totally. So, you know, I used to type the release notes every 3 weeks when the release would come out, and it was pretty regular. It started getting a little bit bigger. We switched to the forums, which seemed like they got a little bit less traffic, and I think that is when it used to be I could type them in the system a little bit early, the days leading up to the release, and then I'd basically just hit publish. I think that went away with the forum, and only during this last release notes did I see like unlisted post as an option I had. So I think part of it is learning the new tool, and part of it is it's been extremely busy, and I've been, generally if I type up the release notes, it's like 2 a.m. already after the release has sort of been out for 6 to 8 hours. I see that we're not going to pull it back, and then I start putting it together. And to be honest, the desert expansion was supposed to have a post and didn't, just because I ran out of time and then forgot the next day. It's totally on me. So the goal would be every big release we have it. The smaller releases, I'm still not totally sure if it's just a few bug fixes. I think we could be more specific when it's a key bug fix. I do like to point those out, and I think we can do a better job.
And I'm sure you haven't got the time, and I'm sure even if you did, it wouldn't be a particularly profitable use of your time to monitor the whole of social media around Zwift very closely. But one Zwiftcast listener did make me smile with this question, this suggested question for you. And I'm going to give it more or less word for word. And it's, how many times have you laughed, shouted, or thrown something at your computer after a Facebook comment from an, quote, insufferable Zwifter? How do you put up with Zwifters, John? Asks Andy Jenner. I think Andy's point was, we can be a pretty tough crowd. And you know, some of the things that you see on the forums do kind of make you despair a bit. I mean, are there moments when...
I want to say that there's been 0 moments like that for me. Yeah, I don't know. I expect it in sort of consumer-facing products, and I think even the most roughly worded feedback is, you know, they're still taking the time to give us the feedback, and there's some, if nobody cared about the software, then they wouldn't even be getting, they just delete it and move on with their lives. But people like Zwift enough that they want the issues resolved, or they want their idea heard, or whatever, and I think that's good. I guess maybe it's one of the areas I'm not a pessimist. But when I was 17, I was a customer support tech for Dell computer, and there was a lot of broken stuff that Dell shipped, and I don't know, I kind of understood
angry people
how to deal with customer feedback and whatever. It's not, I wouldn't say it's not stressful to hear it. I hate seeing when there's like a new bug out there and how many people it's affecting, and like, you know, I know it's frustrating to get sort of all kitted up and get your bottles filled and then get on the bike and then like the thing doesn't connect or whatever it is at that moment. That might be frustrating. But I've never thrown anything at the screen. I'm a pretty chill person when it comes to that. So
Don't encourage them, John. They'll just get worse.
there's other people that take a different approach, and that's stressful enough for me. So, but yeah, no, I generally appreciate it, and I like to hear the community feedback, even when it's totally sarcastic and whatever. But having said that, I haven't been on Facebook as much recently. There's so much feedback, and the forums that we now sort of get. You know, the running stuff, I'll still sort of dip in and see what the runners are saying on the Zwift Runners forum. But the cycling is just, there's so many places to hear the feedback that gets kind of groomed a bit more, and it's really, we have people kind of on Facebook listening for bugs, and then sometimes we'll initiate a QA test. So like, oh, this person saw this weird thing, like QA, can you reproduce this issue? So there's a lot of people reading the groups for bugs, but it's not me like every day anymore like it used to be.
As you raise running, I'm going to raise this actually, and it's out of order from the rest of the interview, and it's not particularly flow, but I didn't mean to ask this question earlier, and I didn't, so I'll ask it now. If running fails, and I think it's probably fair to say it's not been an immediate enormous hit, as far as we know. I mean, just anecdotally about the number of runners you see when you're cycling into it, I think it's probably fair to say that. But if it does fail, regardless of where it sits now, if it does fail, will you kill it?
I wouldn't kill it, but it's not. I mean, it's not even fair to say would I kill it, right? We have a process. We have plenty of people, right? We could discuss killing it, but I don't think that's not on our radar, right? Like we want running to be a success, and even if it's not as big as cycling, there's no harm in having it be a feature for all of the Zwifters that are triathletes, or all the cyclers that like to run here. There's no reason. It's using the same features, the same servers. Like there's nothing.
There's no debt accruing from it.
No, I mean, we wrote an event system. The events work for running and cycling. Same with workouts. It's pretty low maintenance as far as it goes. I don't know why.
It's got some time to grow.
Yeah, and to some extent, we sort of need all the treadmills that are sold to be Bluetooth, right? I think that's really when this can come alive. And right now, it's maybe 10% or something of Bluetooth, of treadmills sold are Bluetooth. So there's a hardware bottleneck involved. And, FootPod is an okay stand-in, but it's never as accurate as just getting the data directly from the treadmill like you do with a trainer, right? When we started Zwift Cycling, there were plenty of trainers broadcasting data out there that we could just use, right? There was power meters, there was the Kicker, there was CompuTrainer. Those were the earliest people on there, and they had a good experience. It's hard to say, hey, go buy a $2,000 treadmill so you can try this.
Yeah. Okay. And on this, rowing, is it far away? I mean, I think it's an open secret. It's coming. Is it far away?
Well, I went to the indoor rowing championships this year to go see what that was like, and because it is sort of an indoor sport.
It's already an established indoor pursuit. Yeah.
But I have to say, I was not impressed with the current format. Within the current format is, at least the event I went to, it was 2,000 meter races, and they might have 40 competitors on the indoor rowers, and the gun would go off, everybody starts rowing, and it seemed like within about 10% of the race, you knew who the two leaders were going to be, and then about 30% of the race in, you knew who was going to win, and there was no strategy, there's no nothing to it. So that was a bit disappointing from like a could it be fun just as is, right? You just get rowers in, and like you could have events and just let them row. So I think it needs something a little bit more interesting. But having said that, like here at Zwift HQ, we have the Concept 2 rower connecting to Zwift. We read the data. Probably a year ago, we put the rowing route into Watopia. I know somebody has posted the route of that. But you can actually row out on the ocean under the bridges of Watopia. It's really cool. Some nice views there. But we're in that R&D phase of it, right? Trying it out. I have a rower at my house as well. I've got a rower here at Zwift HQ. and we've got some people sort of playing with different ideas.
So early days.
Yeah, I think it could be interesting to see something out in the wild this fall, but you got a date out of me. I don't know. It'll be something to try. It's not. I don't know that it'll be the full.
I'm quite surprised. Fairly quick fire ones, John. Just to finish off, and actually going back to before we got diverted about running and rowing. This idea of the dialogue with the community. I think still the most popular, certainly one of the most long-standing feature requests is Ghost Riders for a PB or some kind of training Ghost Rider. And I noticed Arrival Platform did actually get these shipped a couple of weeks ago. And predictably lots of Zwifters came and just said, we've been asking this for ages and ages and ages. I suppose the point of the question is, what's the point in having a features request system where something works its way to the top and sits there for ages and then nothing happens?
That feels like a loaded question. I mean, we definitely look at it and sort of count things as votes, and it's really down to when we can fit it sort of into the roadmap, where it makes sense. You know, where do we want to schedule the server component of storing, how the recording went over the course of a segment, right? Did they go fast in the climb and slower on the flat after the climb? Whatever. We've got to store all that data somewhere. I feel like a loaded question. Or serve up our old historical fit files or something, right? There's a big part there, and it's just been about prioritization, and we sort of know all the stuff that we are working on, whereas the community doesn't necessarily know all the things we have in motion. So from the outside, it just looks like we're ignoring the feedback. But I don't know that we would ever bring back. I think it's interesting. I think the thing you're talking about is the blue ghosts. They look almost exactly like the blue men from Jarvis. I don't know that we would bring anything back in that form, but we've had the pacer bots that we use for some of the events, like kind of hovering robots, and that one of the uses for those was we were going to sort of shoot them forward at some of your personal bests, so you could kind of see up ahead how fast you've been. I think that might be how we represent it, rather than ghost riders on the course while there's all these other Zwifters on the course too. The hovering robots kind of get out of the way of the sort of public roads a little bit. So I don't know if that answers your question as far as why have it, but it's not ignored. Everything is more complicated than it seems, and we have a bunch of things that we think have a higher impact, right? We wouldn't be the first software that had ghosts or the last software that had ghosts. Do we believe it's going to drastically change Zwift? Not really. It is totally a nice to have, and I think at some point we will have it. I know at some point we'll have it.
It doesn't sound like it's super high on the priority.
I don't know if that answers your question. I wouldn't say that, but it's not. I can't say it's in development right now like I can with other things.
Some real quick fire stuff. Do you like the word blob?
As a name for the giant group of cyclists rather than a peloton, it looks like a blob. It acts like a blob.
It's a blob. Okay. Club functionality. This has been around for a while. Are we getting close on this?
It's something we're working on. Yeah, I think that'll be a big thing for us. I think one of the core drivers of it is to try to let some of the event organizers create their own events and set their own settings. So that right now they sort of have to go through email our organizers, and then we'll go into the server system and set up the event how they want, and if they want to change something, they'll email us again. I think the clubs kind of gives us a good mechanism, like the admins of the clubs can go in and create the events. They can also create them without having to care so much about the overall event calendar, because it's sort of only club members see those events. So it really solves a bunch of problems for us, or for the community, and I think it also can really help with those new Zwifters coming in, kind of try to match them with a welcoming club. So yeah, we're working on it. It's a big one for us.
And finally, just because I'm sure people would love to hear it from you, because you must be the best placed person in the world to explain it. Why can I not save a ride and then do something else without quitting the program?
Well, you sort of can on mobile platforms, right? You don't have to quit the app. The last thing that's keeping us from doing it is, well, first of all, we've got this, I alluded to earlier, we've got a team, a sort of UI and user experience, people sort of looking at our menuing system, and in the sort of near future, one of their, let's say, redesigns will help alleviate this. You sort of go back to a home page. But I think the biggest thing is with the world swapping that we do, there's still, I think we still have a couple of bugs left that we see on iOS, where after somebody has swapped through a certain amount of times, maybe they were in Bologna and then they were in London and New York. There's still a couple of issues, I think, lingering in that swapping code. And on a mobile device, it's not that big of a deal because every few days, like, kind of apps get dumped out of memory and restarted, and so it naturally cleans everything up. But with I could imagine like a gym or some sort of cycling club just leaving Zwift up the whole day, running, and people signing in, going to the world, and signing back out. So it's really that use case, I think, is what that's kind of like the last thing we're really worried about from a technical standpoint. I wouldn't say it's that good of it's kind of a lame reason. We can certainly focus on fixing it. I think we would by the time the UI change happens. And also, it's probably just a few percent of Zwifters that are sort of not logging in, doing their thing, and shutting it down, right? That plays a part in it too. If it had been tons and tons and tons and tons of people wanting that feature, we would have done it years ago. And to some extent, as the crowd grows, right, as the amount of Zwifters grows, everything seems like it's getting to be a bigger feature, right?
I have kept you 40 minutes longer than I promised I would. It's very bad of me. And I could go and talk to you for much longer, but
I feel like I'm just starting to warm up here with you.
So, okay, I'll get one last, very, very last question, which is a bit of a killer, really. Tell us something we don't know.
Wow, okay. Well, what immediately comes to mind are factoids about time synchronization from the 1800s. I just learned something interesting there.
Tell us something we don't know about Zwift, which is really interesting, John. Let me rephrase it.
What have I not? I feel like I gave you guys some interesting, a concept of turbo boost pads exists in Zwift, and we've just never shipped it. Like, racing games would have a section that you go on and like shoots you forward, at 50 miles an hour. That exists. Like, we have all these sort of pieces. Remember, I alluded to earlier I talked about it earlier. The jungle expansion had some sort of ruins from some gameplay idea that we never shipped. The Volcano had something. There's also this concept of boost pads and, let's say, road furniture that's in there that we've just never used. I mean, we could see. I just know that the more serious Zwifters are cringing at that idea, but just like some of the new power-ups we launched, these are sort of opt-in experiences, right? We could see a day where there's a club that's offering more gamified racing. It's maybe more fun, less serious. That's where we were expecting to use it, not just riding around in Watopia, and every event has boost pads. But anyway, these things are coded, and some of the art, I think, might have even influenced the time trial conveyor belts. It sort of lives, that same style is now part of the conveyor belts you see with the blue arrows moving up. So there's all sorts of little things that we try, and then a lot of it, I think, will see the light of day at some point. And most of the stuff actually existed, like I said, sort of before CB Arcade was announced. I was like, they're going to do this to sort of the gamified events, and to some extent they have.
Well, there's certainly been enough in this conversation, I'm sure, to send a few people rooting around the code and the game, looking for the things that you described. And some great answers there, John. And I must tell Swiftcast listeners, actually, John, I've interviewed John a number of times now, actually. And you seem very relaxed and happy and fluid and very, very happy to answer some quite challenging questions. So thank you very much indeed for your time and your cooperation, John. Much appreciated.
Thanks, I enjoyed it.
That's that for episode 65. We'll be back with more next time. As usual, I'd like to make it clear that whilst the Zwiftcast enjoys and is grateful for the support Zwift gives the podcast, nothing we say is influenced by anybody at the company. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Very relaxed.
you